Hey, Vicki.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing this fine day?
Excellent. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here too. I always feel humbled when I'm in front of a Amazon best-selling author with tons of great reviews.
That's very kind of you.
Uh, you're a construction pro.
I am. Yeah, I've focused on this industry for 30 years. I love working with contractors.
Yeah. What do you? Let's do a cold start. I'm just going to ask you, who are you? The heck are you doing on this show?
Why am I here?
Yeah.
So I'm Vicki Suiter with Suiter Business Builders, and I help contractors generate more profits in their business, have more time to enjoy their life, and to have more fun in what they do in general, whether it's in their business or in their life. And the most direct way that I do that is helping people build great organizations that players want to work with, and teaching people how to build great teams.
That's a big order, tall order for construction trades. Yeah.
Well, it's the key to freedom. Like, we start a business because we want to be able to live the all-American dream, right? Be able to choose what we do and how we have our time, and to be able to make as much money as we want. And what so many people find is they go into business and you become a slave to it. Especially, I see this with so many contractors. So I'm super passionate about helping people reclaim the original goal of, I want to be able to make as much money as I want, have the time and the freedom to enjoy and love my life.
Yeah. It's funny. You and I sound very similar at least in what we say.
Yeah, I
Um,
got that from when we talked the first time, which I'm really glad to be here. I feel like there's a simpatico between us, so
yeah.
it's
Oh,
nice.
simpatico even. That's right. Yeah. You know what I say for that same thing is people want more out of the business, but what they want to see is they want to drive a newer truck, towing a bigger boat to a nicer cottage on a prettier lake.
Nice.
Right?
It's
Because
a
we need
nice
that time.
visual.
None of us work. We don't have a business for business reasons. We have a business for personal reasons, right? And
Right.
to
Yeah,
your
it's
point,
nicely said.
what was that first dream? Why did I start this electrical company, HVAC company, paving, stone installation, whatever it is?
Right.
Why?
Hmm.
And that's what I guess what you and I do is get people back to that.
Yes, that's the goal.
So you wrote a book called The Profit Bleed,
I did.
and we're talking about people today. So maybe start by telling us all a little bit about your background in this construction trade and how you've been working in it.
Well, I long ago, far away, I was married to a painting contractor, and I just really saw how he struggled in growing his business and managing his business. And I just, as I helped him and worked with him a bit, I realized that there were some skills that I had that I could bring to this industry to help them improve, and they have more of what they wanted out of their business. And so when I had our son in 1990, I decided I was going to stop working in corporate America for 70 hours a week for somebody else, and I
Oh
was going to
yeah.
start my own business. And I decided I was going to focus on this industry. So my first client, other than, I never charged my now ex-husband when I worked for him, but my first client was a design build contractor,
Oh wow.
and I just started really focusing on this industry. And I just found that I loved working with contractors. I loved their authenticity,
Yeah.
they are much smarter than they give themselves credit for. I love the complexity of this industry, and I just really found that I liked working with contractors and interior designers. And so that really became my focus, and I have stayed with that vertical market ever since. And so, and over time, the business, what I bring to it evolves. I have a financial management background. That was originally where I got my start, and then I got
Right.
certified as a coach, and I got certified as a NLP practitioner, so I could understand more about like how people's brains work and really what motivates us as human beings, both as in what gets in our way as business owners and leaders from getting what we want, and our
Right.
beliefs that get in the way, but also what it is that motivates human beings on the employee side of it, because teams are such a huge part of,
Oh,
as
just
you said earlier when we were talking, it's like that's the key to, those are the keys to the kingdom of freedom right there is when we can learn how to tap into the potential of our teams. We have much greater potential for being able to build the dreams, the business that we dreamed of originally.
I've been hearing this from so many people for quite a while here, is there's no trouble getting work. Right now is probably the greatest time ever to be in business. There's lots of work to be had.
In the 30 years that I've been in business, yep.
Yeah. Delivering on that work is the challenge because of the dumbest things. At least as owners, we think they're the dumbest things. People come and work for us for their own reasons and motivations, whatever it is. But even then, it feels like we're over talking it. I just want you to show up on time. I want you to do a great day's work, and then you get to go home. If I could count on you to do that, life would be so much easier. And yet people become really the critical constraint in a lot of businesses. So let me ask you this. You know a lot about people and hiring people, managing people, building cultures. If I was to ask you the people question, would you say people are a problem or an opportunity right now?
Oh gosh, they are the opportunity. And I think the question is really more about not, where do I find the superstars out there? Or, I hear a lot of people whining about the millennials and their lack of motivation, which, by the way, our parents' generation was terrified of what a mess we were going to make of the world. That it's really more of as I see it, it's more of a function of how do we understand what motivates human beings and how do we tap into that? And one of the things that I have learned over the years is that the thing that's most important to all of us is that we have a sense of belonging, mattering, and contribution. So if we can have if you can build in your culture that people have a sense of mattering, belonging, and a sense of contribution, your opportunity to be able to grow your business and be more profitable and to be able to spend less time micromanaging and babysitting people goes up exponentially.
Yeah.
And when I say belonging, mattering, and contribution, I don't mean coddling, babysitting, and micromanaging, right? Because that's the condition that it is right now. And it's not like a warm fuzzy thing. It's not like it's just
setting
really
the expectations for being on our team.
Yeah. Well, and it's like when you think about it is fundamental for all of us that we have that. Then the question is, how do you tap into that with your team? And one of the ways that I see that we do that is when we get super clear with people about how do they win the game with us. One of the things that, I often will say to people is, so Dominic, have you ever played Monopoly?
Yes.
Okay. And when we first learned how to play Monopoly, almost everybody says yes to that question, right? So it's something that's very, very sensual, right? We grew up on that. When we first learned how to play Monopoly, we are told, collect 200 when you go past go. You have a little boot or a hat. You move around with the, however many spaces on the dice. If you pick up a chance card, do that. You can buy property. And by the way, whoever ends up with the most amount of money at the end of the game wins. I don't know about you, but I lost a lot of Monopoly games for a lot of years with that being the basis of how I played the game because nobody had taught me the strategy.
What's the strategy, by the way? Now we're all listening. Okay, how do I win Monopoly against my kids?
How do I win Monopoly? So I think it was my older brother, Harry. I'm the youngest of 4 kids, who felt sorry for me one day. And he said, let me explain to you the strategy for winning the game.
Yeah.
You want to buy all 4 railroads because you can collect way more rent. So have that be the focus. And by the way, go for Boardwalk and Park Place because those are the most likely places to land and they have the highest rent and you're going to be able to have a better chance of being able to collect more money as people go around. And all of a sudden the lights started to go on for me about how do I have a strategy to actually let me win the game as opposed to just moving around the board and doing all the the moves, right?
There's a bunch of people listening right now that are they're gonna hang up the podcast and go home and go, okay, let's play Monopoly. I
figured it out. Yeah. I
Good.
did finally start winning some Monopoly games, but it's still to this day, it's not my favorite game, but But
Yeah.
it's true for our teams as well, that a lot of times people have quote unquote job descriptions that are nothing more than task lists that tell people how to move around the board, but they don't actually give them the results that they're accountable for. And so when you start to build with your teams a structure whereby everybody has what I call them position agreements. I don't call them job descriptions, and I call them position agreements for a very specific reason, that it's not just about what are the results that you're accountable for, but how I hold it is, what's the agreement that we have about the results you're accountable for.
Mm-hmm.
So now it does a couple of things. One is you start to shift from everybody on my team is just a helper, because that's how it started out, right? You were smaller, you started to grow, you hired people, and they were helpers.
Yeah.
And it's that thing of, how do I move out of that mode? And sometimes we think, well, if I just hire somebody who's already done that job, then they'll know how to do that job. Well, I don't know about you, but project managers come in every shape, form, and manner, and their skill sets vary dramatically from company to company, even though they have the same title. So how do we get clear with people about what's our criteria for, let's say, a project manager? And how do I define what specific results constitute winning the game with me? So that would be like, for a project manager, it would be like schedules are produced every 2 weeks. And your foreman does 2-week look aheads every week on Thursdays, and cost of completes are done once a month by the 5th of the month, right? So now what I've started to do is I've started to move from there's just tasks that they have to do to specific, measurable results. And one of the things that I recommend people do is that you use SMART goals. So a lot of us have heard that acronym, right? So there's specific, measurable, there's clear accountability, they're realistic, and time-driven. So if you can start to do that with your position agreements that you design with your team, now what you can start to do is you can start to create a culture where people have a much better idea and are much clearer about how to win the game with you. They have the ability to self-manage those results, and they have then the potential for having a greater sense of contribution, value, belonging, and mattering. So now what you've done, right? So now you've tapped into solving a problem called people are more like helpers than taking ownership. You've also solved a problem in that you now have people who are thinking about and looking at your business and in their engagement and the relationship with you in a whole new way, where they feel like I can be accountable to a result and take more pride in that. And that's part of the thing that, if you want to build a culture where great people want to work, create an environment where the stakes are of more value.
Yeah.
Right? Because that creates more value within the organization. And then you get the extra added benefit of when your team is more aligned with what their clear results are, then they're going to be more effective at their job, which means they're going to be more effective in managing the client relationship, which means you're going to make more money. Projects will have less delays, right?
Yeah.
And there's a second element of that but I know you want to ask me a question, so I'm going to.
Yeah. Well, culture. Thank you. The question of culture, because there's going to be people listening, and I always like to imagine the people listening are walking their dog, or they're on the treadmill, or maybe they're driving, right? So that's what I see in my mind. But there's somebody listening right now who goes, culture? We don't have a culture. And I would argue you do have a culture. You just haven't been, you haven't taken the lead in saying what the culture is going to be, but every company has a culture.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So maybe talk about that a little bit, because culture is a weird word. We don't really understand what that means.
It is. Because I think, Dominic, a lot of times that people, when they think of culture, they think, oh, like I have to have, a vision statement or a mission statement. And we have a culture of being fun, and we do parties, and, we acknowledge people on their birthdays. And I go, those are all great things. I believe in all of those things, but that's not really the culture. The culture is what's the experience people have every day when they show up at your business, when they do their job. do they have an experience of that they have a sense of belonging, mattering, and contribution?
Yeah.
And if they don't, if they get treated like a tool, if they get treated like a child who needs to be micromanaged, if they get treated like, somebody who you go, oh, geez, like, there's not clear communication with them, but you're just like looking for the next place people screw up, or you don't ever say anything, you never give them feedback. They just, and you leave them on their own because you're just too busy, you don't want to deal with it, or B, you're super conflict adverse. Now it's like that's a culture, right?
I gotta give you a funny story about that. Happened on one of my teams. If I don't train my team on how to do things, they have to go and figure out their best way of doing it. So this was one of my supervisors, not a manager, but a supervisor, and they said something really bad and disrespectful to one of the people on their team. And of course, that comes back to my office, and I've got to deal with it. There's this bit of drama going on, blah, blah, blah. So I deal with the drama as much as I can. Then I pull the supervisor aside, and I'm like, hey, where did you come up with that idea for how to manage that? And they said 30 Rock. They had heard it on a TV show. Do you know the TV show 30 Rock?
Yes.
Yeah, there's nothing serious about that show.
Wow.
But you know what hit me in the head was, like I really screwed up. If they think they're getting management advice from a comedy show that's meant to ruin people in humor, then I've screwed up. And so to your point about culture is the expectations I set when you show up to work for me. And for me, it starts with simple things. The newsletter I did this week is one where I've got this little thing in my head where if somebody coils up the hose or the cable wrong, I go like, I have to go see a professional therapist on this. If you coil the hose, I've got a problem. No, I'm easygoing on so many things, but when I see my people, because I used to be a painting contractor too, when I see them uncoiling a hose or a cable like a drunk monkey, I lose my mind. I'm like, that should have been done right before. So the simple system for that for me is just shoot a video on how I expect a cable or a hose or a cord to be put away. And if I don't have the time to do that, just find one I like on YouTube and make my people watch it.
Yeah.
Not the first day, but the second day. So watch this tonight. That's the expectation going forward. And now that's the culture on our team is that let's just say Dom expects hoses put away properly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I need help on that. I need professional $100 an hour therapist help on that for sure.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe that's okay. Well, one of the things that you're talking about is the whole thing about when you have set this criteria and you've said, okay, so here are the results and that you're accountable for, and that we now have agreement about what those results are. That you then need, the second piece is, have I set up the structure and the systems and the processes to support that person being able to be successful at their job? We have to, like, one of the greatest investments we can make in our business is to invest in what you're talking about right now is training, right? Yeah. So have I put time and energy into training people to do their job effectively? I'll give you an example. There was this client, Joe, of mine who, when we first started working together, he was a senior project manager, and his entire day was spent putting out fires. And when we started to talk and dig down, it was like his foremen, were treated like they were helpers of him managing projects. And none of them had clear accountability. They didn't have position agreements in place. There were a lack of systems that had them planning their jobs. It was all the project manager's job to do it. So Joe's job. So I said, well, let's do this. Let's put position agreements in place with your foreman, get agreement with him, buy-in, which he did. And then in the process of doing that, we looked at what's the systems and the processes that need to be in place for the foreman to be able to have the tools to effectively manage their job. And one of the things that we came up with was 2-week look-aheads. And when he first put it in the position agreement, they had never done anything like that before. Mm-hmm. And the foremen all said, we're really grateful to have the position agreement. We're really clear, but there's some things that you put in here that we've never done before. He was like, no problem. We're going to train on it.
Yeah.
It took him and so he set up the process where they had to do this 2-week look ahead, the plan for materials and subcontractors and labor needs and issues open with the client and so on. So it's this form that they fill out, and they did these meetings every week. Well, when he first started, the foreman showed up for several weeks with the form blank because they didn't have that thinking, right? So he had to invest that time to train them to have that thinking of looking ahead versus just dealing with whatever was in front of them that day. And over time, it took him probably 6 months, honestly. There were about 5 foremen that he was managing, that Joe actually had them start to show up with that form completely filled out, with the foreman ready to ask and eager to ask questions about how to address different issues.
Yeah.
That was an investment of time, but I got to tell you, he went from being a fireman and having his hair on fire all day long, putting out emergencies and urgent issues, to being able to be much more proactive at managing his projects, managing the client relationship.
Yeah.
And he ended up starting to make more money on jobs. He started to like what he did more. He had more free time.
Yeah.
And the whole organization rose up in the process. The whole culture completely transformed just by him doing that, even just that one thing with the foreman. Because what he started to do is to have them operate at a different level of accountability. And their retention rate went way up of employees. Their skill level of their foreman went way up. They had happier clients. They started making more money on projects just from doing that one thing with their foreman.
Yeah. It's amazing that the knock-on effect of having systems, it takes a lot of work to do it. It takes smart work, right? But as you and I both see so much, the best surfers ride the biggest waves. The business owners who are willing to take on those tasks of like, I'm going to train my people. I'm going to invest in training. And of course, people listening expect you and I to say this because we're in professional advising role. But the reason we keep saying that is because it works.
Yes.
The joke, and I don't know if you make this joke as well, but I'll hear from people, hey, Dom, what if I train my people and they leave? Right? I'm going to invest all this money and time training my people. What if they just leave? And the answer, and I think you probably already know the answer, is, well, what if you don't train them and they stay?
Yeah.
Which world do you want to live in?
How much more costly is that?
How much more costly, and just headache and heartache and missing your kid's soccer game, your daughter's dance recital, because you're cleaning up the same problem today as you cleaned up 5 years ago, as you cleaned up 10 years ago when you left the company you were at before and decided to do it yourself. So these big questions, this fuzzy thing called culture, yeah, it's a unicorn. It's unicorns and rainbows. But think of that unicorn as like a Budweiser draft horse with a big chrome thing sticking out of it. So that's what it is. When we because why do we keep talking about culture? The reason is because it is the thing. It's the thing.
Yeah, well, and here's what I see over and over again, Dominic, and you probably do too, is that when you build a culture where people really want to work, they want to stay. Now, I'm not the first one to ever say this. We all know that money is not the only thing that motivates somebody to stay in a job. Now, money is important. I say you should pay people well and what their value and worth is, and don't be cheap and all of that. So I'm a big proponent of that. And at the same time, if you want to retain people, money doesn't retain people. Building a culture where people feel like they have a sense of contribution, belonging, and mattering, where people feel like the game is a higher game and a much more interesting and fun game to play at, that's the kind of culture that attracts and keeps A players to your team. That's the thing that makes people want to stay. And I've seen it over and over again, where I've got this one painting contractor who they literally, in this market where it's super hard to find people, they have people who are great painters calling them to find out if they have openings.
That's the situation we all want.
That's the situation we all want.
Yeah.
They have been very intentional about how they have built that culture, that they have focused on the training, the development of their team, holding people to their highest potential. That's the other thing. It's like when you set a position agreement, it should hold people at their highest potential and continue to demand forth what's possible for us as human beings, which is way more than people give us credit for. And I don't mean like abdicate. I don't mean expect. I don't mean like, oh, you should know how to do that. You've done that for many years. I mean how do I set the structure and the systems, right, and the processes to really empower somebody to do their best work and invest in that training in them.
Yeah. So what's the place? Where do I start? Let's say I'm listening to this episode and I agree, I've got to do something different in the company. I've got you, Vicki, right in front of me right now. Where do I start? Give me one simple thing to do.
I would say the one simple thing to do is to start to develop position agreements with your team and start to define what's winning the game with you, and be clear about what are the specific, measurable, clearly accountable, realistic, and time-driven results that you want your team to produce. Right. So look at each of the positions, not the people, but the positions in your company, and then apply those positions to the people that you've got and look at and then in the process get agreement with them so that they will take ownership of it. And I actually have a form that I'm happy to share with your listeners, Dominic, that is 9 steps to writing a great position agreement. And actually it's 6 steps to writing a great position agreement.
Thank you. How would they get that?
The URL will be down here, hopefully at the bottom of your screen, but I'll give you the download link.
If you share the URL, we'll put it in the show notes for people.
I'll do that.
And actually, why don't we do this? If people want to know more about you or find out how you go about doing this with companies, how do we reach you?
Well, you can check out my website at suiterbusinessbuilders.com. That's SUITER businessbuilders.com. And on there, I teach a course called Build Your Dream Team that's all about helping managers and leaders and business owners implement some of the stuff that we're talking about today.
Yeah, and you've got this great book called The Profit Bleed. And, I found that, and I found you because I'm running How to Find and Fix Your 8 Profit Leaks in Your Business. That's how you and I originally met, because I saw your book and I'm like, I have to interview Vicki. So you've got a bunch of great reviews on that book. What made you decide to write that?
It was really my deep desire to want to share what I've learned and what I've helped people do in their business over all these years. And I felt very compelled to want to put that in writing and share it with people, because as a business consultant and coach, there's only so many people I can work with. And I am deeply passionate about helping people make more profits, have more time in their life, and love what they do again. And I felt like if I could get the essence of that into a book, then I could help more people. And that's why I did it.
Great. I love it. Well, you've got a topic there that I think we all care about in construction and in contracting, because as I always say, profits don't gush out of a business, they leak. Right? It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's a little bit here. It's a little bit there. It's somebody showing up late for the site there, and extra trip to Home Depot here. And before you know it, you're just not making as much as you thought you were. Mm-hmm. And really what's happening is a bank financing somebody's construction project.
Right.
The roles have reversed. So thank you very much for joining us today.
You're
Sorry,
welcome.
You had a closing thought or comment? Let's go to closing thoughts.
I was just going to say that within the book, I actually, there's a ton of free resources that I reference, and people can get it for free if you just pay shipping and handling. If you go to theprofitbleed.com/free. And at the end, when you check out, there's also an opportunity to get a whole bundle of tools and resources that you could start to implement with your team in different areas to help you start stopping the profit bleed, but also help you implement what we talked about in terms of some of those steps and processes that will let you produce more consistent results.
Wonderful. Just a ton of information, Vicki. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun, Dominic.
Yeah, for me too. Thanks, Vicki. Hopefully we'll have you back on again one day.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.